My name is Alessandro Sicioldr, and I define myself as a painter. My relationship with tradition is fruitful and ongoing. I use tradition as a tool and as a database from which to extract information and inspiration, rather than something to be worshipped. And I use this kind of language to interpret and to give life to my visions and my dreams. I'm really grateful to HOBAN because they gave me the possibility to explore fully and in a large space many different images, and I felt totally free to express myself without any limitation. This is my first solo exhibition in Korea, and I'm really glad to be showing there because it's a place that showed me a great response during the years, and I feel that even if there's a great distance, geographic distance between Italy and Korea, I feel there's a common spirit that transcends borders and unites sensibilities all over the world. The title of my exhibition is Gleam of a Silent Ecstasy. Is connected to the nature of my creative process, which is one of silence and contemplation. And I try to interact with the painting in order to transform my inner feelings and emotions into visual imagery. What I really love about painting is this relationship between the craftsmanship and the dream, in a sense. So my visions usually are not manifested through like overwhelming visions, like ecstatic visions. They appear like something on the margin of consciousness, and then you try to solidify them into concrete forms. And so you have something that is ephemeral, and you need to make it solid. And this is the paradox of painting, and I think it's one of the most interesting things about art making in this sense. The title of my exhibition is somehow connected with this kind of process. And I think that the silent ecstasy is a perfect term to describe these fleeting moments where an idea appears. And I think that having an idea is one of the most important things an artist can have, and then everything comes afterward. After the idea has appeared, I try to start the battle with my painting. And that is a really complicated process of action and reaction. I have to follow the logic of the painting itself that creates almost automatically. And I try to capture something that is ineffable with a technique that is really concrete and solid. And that is the challenge for me. So the whole point is about making space and to empty the mind and the ego from intervening inside the process, and to just, they sometimes use this like metaphysical terms like the muses or inspiration. I don't know if those things have a kind of ontological existence on their own. But at the same time, I realize that this is true in the process. So if you make space inside of yourself, automatic images are going to appear, and then it's your task to transform them into concrete form. and to show the world what you have received. In my work, I don't use mythological motifs in an overt way. I rather think that mythology in itself is created through a process of collective dreaming. So I don't think that art is really different from that. I think that, as Fellini said, artists are kind of collective dreamers in behalf of all the population. So I think everyone is doing their little part to create this collective dream. A practice that privileges silence, contemplation, slow working, and craftsmanship is somehow a resistance against certain tendencies of the modern world, but at the same time I feel that there is a consistent part of modernity that requires this particular approach. And in a world that is flooded with images of any kind, there is a certain pornography of image, and mainly with AI. I think that going back to a kind of contemplative way to create images is an interesting approach to have today. The way a painting is made requires months of work from the artist, so it is impossible to perceive correctly an image in few minutes. And this is why, even though we are always talking about images, it's not the same as we conceive an image today, which is quick and you can consume a large quantity of them. A painting needs time to be understood and to be perceived correctly. I think that I have a good relationship with the viewer of the artwork. I think, in a sense, they complete the artwork. And my paintings are communicative and figurative, so I want people to look at them and they do not need to have a particular study or preparation before. I think they can experience the painting even if they don't have a background in art. And I think that painting in a certain way was born this way, and then it became something of the elite. But I think that what I try to communicate is really complicated, and so I need a visual language that is readable from the viewer. So I like this clarity, and I would love to have a clear language to communicate with the spectator. And sometimes I love to hear the interpretations of my viewer, and sometimes they go beyond my imagination. I'm really glad to hear their impressions and their opinion about the images that they are seeing. I believe the task of the artist is to become a sort of a conduit, and the final image becomes a neutral space onto which the viewer projects their subjectivity, their identities, their trauma, their experience. And so all of these interpretations that are projected on the image are in a sense valid. So there is no a right way to interpret a painting. It's rather a kind of a support for an interior experience. This is how I conceive the image. So I'm creating something, I'm creating a kind of a scaffolding, and which is an oniric image, but everyone creates their own meaning in this way. I think this is kind of commonplace in a sense for artists today, but this does not make this kind of process of relationship between the artist and the viewer as less important or less meaningful in a sense. I think that every one of us as people have kind of a beauty inside of their interiority, in a sense. And you can see that in children's dreams. You can see in the attitude of children that we will all share this kind of inner world. And I think that when you enter in this kind of world, like through some paintings or fairy tales, for example, you kind of enter again inside this attitude toward life, which is enriching from an emotional perspective. So you kind of train yourself to be more empathetic and you live in an emotional kind of world which is necessary today, because we are sometimes losing our relationship with empathy. And I think that I'm not a big fan of escapism. I don't like to go away from the world. I don't think that is a useful attitude. But at the same time, living with a kind of magic inside the daily life is something that is enriching, and living in contact with our inner beauty it's a sort of training to be more empathetic and more emotional and more sensitive. And I think as a world today, we really need to train our empathy, our relationship with emotions, with feelings, and art kind of does that. And so what I want to paint basically is fairy tales for this. I want to, in a sense, re-enchant myself in periods where I tend to disillusionment and nihilism, and at the same time maybe help other people to have this kind of speck of enchantment in their life. And I think maybe every artist strives for that. Since the beginning of my history as an artist, I shared my works online, and I've received any kind of response from all over the world. So I've always had this kind of tendency to communicate with different cultures. Yes, from a certain point of view, my art is really rooted in Renaissance for what concerns the language. But at the same time, I think that the imagery kind of transcends borders. So I've never had a response just from a single country. So I think that Korea is no exception to that. I think that Korean people are really interested in art right now. I saw that there is this great interest in expression, and I love Korean movies, for example. There are many creatives from Korea that I love, so I think it's a vivid and energetic place. So I'm not surprised that they have this kind of response toward my work. My daily life is quite simple. Everything revolves around my practice, so I spend many hours in the studio painting, and when I don't paint, I tend to live a normal life. And I think that sometimes we have too many distractions, and in order to access the world of ideas, as an artist, I feel the need to concentrate on emptiness as a kind of practice. And I really love what Byung-Chul Han said about the inaction. He used this concept called inaction, where you don't do anything, as an active practice. So it's a kind of productive and creative inactivity, and it's one of the most important features of the artist's life. Boredom, for example, is a really interesting thing that we seem to have forgotten, because we are always distracted by notifications and everything. So this kind of imagery has its its ground on listening to deeper parts of ourselves that are sometimes neglected in order to privilege daily tasks. There are, of course, some recurring motifs in my works. One of them is the communication between these two realities. Some figures are living in a particular state, and then there is this communicator or this presence from another world that interacts with them. And I think this is the common denominator of all sacred experiences. There is a communication between the other world and this world. And this is one of the central themes. And I think that every painting is in a way the same painting that is proposed again and again. And I don't see this as a repetition. I don't believe in novelty as a value in itself. I think that it's more a kind of digging in the depths of this kind of motif. And there is always a communication between a being that is coming from this alternative reality and the figures. And there is also this kind of ritual that is taking place that is a kind of language or a codification for this relationship between these two worlds. So sometimes this encounter happens in nature. Sometimes it happens, in a context, in an environment that is designed for that. And the sacred is the common theme, in a sense, because I think that as modern societies, we have lost this sense of sacred, and maybe these collective dreams are telling us to reconnect with this part. And it's not connected to any of the conventional religions, it's more of an attitude toward life. So this journey is exemplified by the theme of the Annunciation, which is often depicted in medieval and Renaissance, which the Archangel Gabriel interacts with Maria. And this kind of depictions have always interested me since when I started. What I find interesting is to depict a moment that is on the border. It's a kind of liminal moment where this contact happens between the two worlds. And I think this is one of the most interesting things to depict, and I'm always trying to get there, to this kind of crack where the two realities are in contact. And it's really hard to define. It's something that happens in silence and contemplation, and in a moment of, yes, a silent ecstasy, in a sense, which is not, as I said before, overwhelming. It's more of an intuition that happens in just 1 second and makes you realize the presence of the otherness. And another theme that I worked on this exhibition is the theme of the castle or the citadel, which is kind of the representation of a path towards the innermost part of ourselves. One of the features of my artistic practice is the translation of an emotional state into an image. And sometimes these images are still, and they might look like some frescoes from Italian Quattrocento. And sometimes they are really chaotic and full of figures and situations happening. So it depends on the inner state, and I try to be as true as possible to that emotional state that I have inside of me. Since when I was a kid, I used drawing, painting, and the creation of image as a way to translate this relationship with my inner self. So it's hard to describe with words. In the future, I just want to keep creating and to be more faithful to the visions that I have, and to improve technically and artistically in general. And I would also want to be a kind of inspiration for other people, maybe to pursue this kind of endeavor. And even though I feel that I am still a beginner, so I have a lot to learn about painting, which is a kind of enormous world to explore, and this is kind of what I want to do in the future.